Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program of Daniel Davis. On the program, natural healing. This is a wonderful thing that we're going to be talking about today with a hands-on technique that can help to improve the body structure and function of the organs. This particular technique can address many issues such as IBS, Crohn's disease, and colitis, as well as for those of you out there who have menstrual cramps and back pain. It's simply known as Nei Tsang, and joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is a practitioner who started out as a massage therapist but became profoundly changed as he attended a retreat and discovered this very unique practice. I'd like to welcome to the Beyond 50 radio program today our guest, Andrew Clower. Andrew, how are you today?
I'm doing very good, thank you.
Ready to put some hands on to the interview here and see how much we can improve our particular conversation and exchange?
Sure thing, let's do it.
Now, tell us about this. How old is this practice? Where did it come from?
This is a thousands-of-year-old Taoist practice, the ancient Chinese secret, so to speak. It was done by monks in the monasteries of ancient Taoist China, and they would practice it on each other to clear out their physical and emotional holding patterns in their bodies so they could refine themselves to practice the highest levels of the Qigong that they were practicing.
Mm-hmm. Now, you said emotional. That's pretty interesting there. So that was pretty much the intention in the creation of this, or?
Well, it has three basic, fundamental belief systems behind it. Emotional being one of the most powerful, but the other two would be the first would be that it detoxifies the body. All of the nutrients in food went into our bodies through our umbilical cord and the toxins left through the umbilical cord. So being creatures of habit as our bodies are now adults, when our bodies get overburdened with toxicity, the extra toxins will get stored in the tissues around the navel and in the belly. So when we get our hands on and start manipulating that tissue, it releases the toxins back into the system. And now that the person is looking for healing, hopefully they're not as toxic as they were when it got stored, and the body now has the opportunity to filter it out and eliminate it. So it starts a big detoxifying process in the body. The second main theory of it is that we grew from the navel and the umbilical cord. So all of the tissue, the connective tissues in the body are connected to that tissue around the navel. This is in a really good Western anatomy book called The Endless Web, if anybody is interested in exploring that connection further. So if we hurt an ankle or we're carrying a purse on our shoulders and our shoulder is hitched up all the time, those tension patterns in the body will refer back to a tension around the navel. In most Western modalities of massage therapy, they work from the peripheries in and they never address the core of the abdomen. So from Nei Tsang, we start to address those holding patterns from both the peripheries and the center of the body, unwinding the tension patterns and restructuring the body. And then the third, the emotional that we started this conversation with, that's the main theory, is that our organs create and store our emotions. And this is in every language that I've explored, like the gall of him, or that was hard to swallow, or butterflies in the stomach, or it's going to take me a while to digest this. In Hawaiian, there's a word ka'au, which means the place of knowing or the guts. So it's in lots of languages, every one that I've looked into, but it's lost from our scientific understanding of how our body works, because in science, emotions are something that they can't really, quantify. So there's no science behind it. The organs digest the emotions just like they digest our food. And happy and positive emotions are easily digested. They pass through us quickly, whereas the negative emotions take a while to digest. And it's like digesting a brick, and it kind of is, has to get broken down, and we have to figure out what we can learn from those emotions, from those experiences, and what we need to eliminate. So that's why it takes a longer time for them to get digested.
It's pretty profound what you're talking about here, Andrew, when you started using some of the ways that people describe in all the languages, as you were saying, around the world about how the body actually communicates. And when you consider how, through science, we found a way to dismantle the body into these individual parts to uniquely find out how they operate and function, and you take a look at this particular practice related to the East, and they looked at the body as a whole system of interdependent, symbiotic, parts, I guess. So they all work together. You can't really separate them. And it's unique that we were built, somehow created, to be able to have a body that communicates and tells us what we need to know. And it's almost as though we surrendered that knowingness over to professionals, for instance. They could be doctors, that we think know more than we do. And this is kind of one of those practices that I would assume, or believe anyway, that kind of brings that power back into the individual, to give that knowingness back. Is that sort of an interesting outcome of something like this?
Yes, that is really the underlying goal of Nei Tsang. It's not as a practitioner, I don't want people to come to me to get fixed or get healed. In fact, I really don't like people that use the word "I'm a healer," because that's kind of an ego base, and it's like people go to healers to get healed. And again, you're giving your power away, just like people go to doctors and give their power away. With the Nei Tsang practice, we are teaching our clients/students how to, figure out what's going on for themselves. Because the Nei Tsang, the theory is that any symptom in our body, any disease symptoms, is the body actually expressing something that's unhealthy that needs to be changed. So if you listen to those symptoms and correct, the problems, then the symptoms will go away. And with Western medicine, a lot of times, it's like you feel a pain, you take aspirin. It's like, the oil light comes on in the car, and instead of figuring out why you're feeling the pain, you take the aspirin, you reach under the dashboard, and you pull out the light so you don't have the light anymore. But the problem is still there, Mm-hmm. So with the Nei Tsang, we it's like teaching people how to become aware of what it is that's actually causing the problems, the diseases, the symptoms to come out, so they can address those issues and the body doesn't have to have the symptoms anymore.
I can't help myself, but when in the context of what we're talking about here, what are your thoughts about cancer, especially the approach we have here in the West?
Well, from my perspective, cancer is the strongest symptom that the body can give you.
So it's basically saying, look, dude, you need to wake up and start doing things that'll make you happier and more energetic, or it's pretty much done.
Listen or die. Yeah, it's the strongest people get cancer.
Right.
Okay, the ones that, because cancer just doesn't happen. First of all, a bunch of other things start to happen. And the people who end up with cancer are the ones that, didn't listen to those other things, took care of them in other ways, had the surgery to get rid of it or masked it with drugs and just kept on going. And then eventually the body just says, okay, you're gonna listen now, Mm-hmm. And that's where you hear the miraculous, people who have big tumor and 3 weeks later it's gone. They figured out what it was that was happening in their lives that was not working for them, and they change it. And then the body doesn't have to have that cancer anymore. Mm-hmm. The kind of the way the Nei Tsang works, I was talking about the emotions getting digested as these negative emotional charges go into the body. The body doesn't, we don't, in our modern lives, we don't have time to take care of ourselves. We have assignments, we have children, we have, house payments and jobs, and, it's not like we had the freedom like we used to hundreds of years ago, where if you didn't feel as good, you could take a few days and nurture yourself. And so now, as a healthy survival response, the body puts things away for later, and that's a healthy response. You have to go to work, and you can't feel bad, so you just put it away. And what happens is more and more things just get put away. And you hear about the people who go on vacation, and every time they go on vacation, they get sick as a dog.
Mm-hmm.
That's the body taking advantage of finally some opportunity to detoxify and address some of these pent-up, stored things in the body. So what happens is all these places that get turned off, where the emotions are being held, get, it's like a numb spot in the body, and those places get bigger and bigger, and that's where the body starts to go out of whack and getting the symptoms all the way up to cancer. So bringing the awareness into those places and reawakening all those different places in the body is what we're doing with Nei Tsang slowly, as after layer of what's been stored in the body.
Now, just to put it into perspective, I think you've touched on this, but to give our listeners an idea of the practice itself, a person shows up to your office or center where you practice this, and it's clothes on. It's a light, gentle massage, as I understand. One of the steps is to bring a person into deep, relaxed breathing during this. Now, it's fascinating because, as I was looking on your website, it talks about some of the outcomes that people experience as they go through this, and the session takes just less than an hour. Describe some of the responses that you have experienced with people that you have practiced this with.
Well, just from a physical standpoint, the first several sessions, a lot of detoxifying happens. So people generally, like right afterwards, can be either really energetic or extremely tired. I had one person that would, like the first 4 or 5 times, he would leave my office and go sit in his car and sleep for 4 or 5 hours. He couldn't even make it home. The first time he was like, I sat down for a second, and the next thing I knew, it was dark, and I was like, where am I? What happened? So he got kind of confused in that regard, and then he figured out that it was from the Nei Tsang. Myself, the day afterwards, my first several sessions, I felt very like, what did I do last night? Like hungover almost, like I partied all night long because of all the toxicity that got released back into my body. So I generally recommend people don't do it before big events or, I had one client that was a high-pressure attorney, and she had a huge law case the next day, and she actually was one of those people that contained everything really tight. And,
oh, boy.
And she was sweating 20 minutes into the session. I had to stop, and she had, soaked the towel underneath her.
My goodness.
She had a huge law case the next day, and she was, sick with the flu, couldn't go, and boy, did I hear about that, let me tell you. So I learned from that, and now I generally tell people, make sure that you don't have much to do the day afterwards because you can have a lot of detoxifying from it. And then on an emotional level, it can stir you up emotionally. So healing isn't necessarily easy. If healing was easy, we'd be all in a much better place. It's much more comfortable to stay in your place of familiarity than to go into the unknown. So, and going and starting to feeling all these emotions that are pent up in the body is, kind of going into the unknown. So it's not uncommon during sessions for people to, make contact with the emotional charges and start to cry, or for people to get angry after sessions, or kind of even do emotional roller coasters where they're laughing and smiling and then crying and then screaming mad and then back to laughing again afterwards. So it can be a little unsettling sometimes after the sessions because you don't know exactly what's going to happen or how you're going to feel. The most common thing that happens is that people have crazy dreams because dreaming is where we deal with our non-rational. I don't say irrational because emotions are definitely always there for a good reason. They're not irrational, but they're non-rational. Mm-hmm. We may not understand why we feel the way that we feel. So a lot of the times to deal with the emotional charges, we have to disconnect from our rational brain, and that's done in our sleep. So the most common after effect is that people have really wild dreams for a few nights after a session.
Mm-hmm. Wild dreams.
Yeah.
That's if they remember them. I can imagine after doing a session like this, the way I dreamed, just how that would all turn out. So. Now, it's just fascinating to think of all of this and the possibilities, and as you were alluding to earlier, that people don't seem to feel they have time, for instance, to heal themselves, to take care of themselves. And I think that we have created a society, especially now with technology, the handheld iPhones and so forth. You see it all over the place now. It's almost as though people were born with these phones glued to their hands. And the fact is, it was interesting, I was talking with someone the other day, and it seems there's this common feeling this day and age that time has become accelerated. And I sort of came up with a theory about that, and it's just mine, but I said the idea that we can have a handheld phone and with a touch of a button pretty much get instant gratification to anything we believe we want. We don't wait for things like we used to anymore, And that was a time that time felt slowed down. It's like, geez, Christmas is here. It seemed like it was just here last week because of that instant moving forward in time with this instant gratification. And I believe that we have sort of, as a result of this technology and all the messages we receive, through any type of medium, is that we are led to believe that we don't have enough time to get the life that we believe we're supposed to have. And I can see something like this kind of turning that dial and pointing somebody in a different direction to slow things down a little bit and wake up and smell the roses, so to speak.
Yep. It's in the session, it keeps it's like a forced meditation almost.
Mm-hmm.
We get the person to start becoming aware of their breathing and staying real present right here and right now, and that's something that is not that common anymore these days. Like you were saying, everyone's checking their emails every 5 minutes, or always distracting themselves, and you don't have that time to really focus on any one thing anymore because it's always something new, more stimulation. So, yeah, I think that the Nei Tsang definitely helps slow things down a little bit and reconnect you with what's here and now, as opposed to out in the ethers of the internet.
Mm-hmm. Now, Andrew, after people have come to you for a session, or perhaps even a couple of sessions, do they disclose to you pretty much any kind of profound life changes they've experienced? Have they shared that with you? What was that like?
Of course, when things start improving with their health, people are usually very enthusiastic about it. That's part of the wonderful part of the job that I'm doing, is seeing and helping people, grow and feel better and feel more. Sometimes it's not better, but they can appreciate it.
Right.
Yeah, some of the changes can be pretty profound, and sometimes it can be really fast. What I find is that when people come in with really chronic, really bad situations going on, a change is felt really quickly. It's the people who think that everything is good and they're just coming in to explore something new that end up feeling bad because they've been hiding the truth from themselves, and then they start to feel what they've been hiding from themselves, as opposed to the people who have been, suffering, that come in and they start to get some relief from their suffering.
It almost seems like an indirect way of psychotherapy in some ways, doesn't it?
It definitely is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like to say it in those ways, but with Nei Tsang, you're giving permission to feel.
Right.
That's what it's all about, is allowing yourself to feel your emotions. And that's what, psychotherapy is about. It's like people are trying to allow themselves to feel what has happened to them, as opposed to intellectualizing it or, just hiding it. And so in Nei Tsang, that's part of that not being uncommon for people to have emotional releases during the sessions. They, bodies. Also, I've had clients that were psychiatrists that said, I've been through, 6 sets of psychotherapy in, my career, and, this is like bringing it up from a visceral standpoint, they intellectually understood everything that happened to them, but they weren't able to release it from their bodies. And the Nei Tsang got into where it was being held, stored in the tissue of the body, and released it, and then they felt, totally different after they, got in touch with those emotions in their tissues.
I'm remembering a scene from the movie Pretty Woman where Richard Gere says to Julia Roberts, I spent over $17,000 in 2 years to finally say, I am angry. I don't think you would need to spend that kind of money to discover that through something like this.
Well, it definitely goes a little bit faster. I think that, the intellectualizing, when you think, you're not feeling. So doing the work in the head, though it's really important to understand things, because without understanding things, you can't actually begin to feel them. But it's sometimes people get stuck in that head process, and they never can actually go beyond it. And Nei Tsang, I think, is the quick road to get beyond it.
Now, I understand that workshops are also taught for people who want to learn this. And what generally is the motivation for somebody to want to learn Nei Tsang?
Well, there's 2 different motivations that I've had. I've had people that are coming in because they've received a couple of treatments, and they want to just really learn and understand what everything is going on in their treatment so they can, make it more of a deep internal self-healing practice. And a lot of self-healing goes on at the workshops because we're doing the Qigong, which is taught to the students along with the belly work, and then the lecture, so they can, get all 3 aspects of what's going on in the session. And then there's the people that are practitioners of some sort that want to start to learn to help their clients with it. But my favorites are the people that are coming in to work with themselves. And everyone actually at the workshop works with themselves. By the end of the first one, you're generally pretty scrambled because of all the work that's being done in the belly is, releasing so much that people, it's taken 5 steps forward in the healing process, so to speak, instead of 1 or 2. It's pretty amazing. I love the workshops.
I could imagine it would be pretty profound, too. And considering that this is an ancient Taoist practice and the core philosophy of Tao to be flowing, to be yielding, that people begin to learn surrender and how important that really is. And when you take a look at some of the hardcore sufferings that people have with certain diseases, as I mentioned earlier, cancer, we take a look at our language around something like that. It's the war on cancer. We've got to fight to win. And that's just the opposite of what we're talking about here.
Yep, it's releasing control and trying to just surrender to what it is that is being told to you by your body. When not saying surrender as in giving up, but surrendering as in to allowing the process to happen, to feel, as opposed to resisting it.
Because, and surrender and the way that we're looking at it here, say you're in one of them rushing rivers. As I suggest to people, if you just relax, make sure that you breathe so you stay buoyant, the river will actually guide you right to the bank. And it's pretty amazing how things like that work when you do surrender. And as you said, it's not about, giving up. It's about finally, letting yourself go into the flow and just kind of seeing where it leads you.
Yeah, it's pretty profound. What I like most about the practice is the self-empowering aspect of it, because it's hard to change without being aware of what you're doing. So with the Nei Tsang, I look at it as primarily bringing in awareness. As a practitioner, I'm a guide to help people feel what they're doing. And like the main way, like I was saying, that we turn off emotions in our body, the main way the body does that is it stops breathing into those places. So people will start to breathe more shallow or breathe up into their chests and not into their bellies at all. And so with the Nei Tsang, we put the hands on the body where they're not breathing and say, okay, feel where my hand is, now bring the breath into the belly or bring it into the sides or wherever it is that the person isn't breathing. And it can be really difficult for people. I've even had it was a yoga instructor. He'd been teaching for 14 years, been practicing for over 20. And I was like, okay, I want you to breathe like this. And he goes, oh, that's easy. That's my yoga breath. So I said, okay, well, then breathe into my hand right here. And he was like, and he couldn't do it. He was like trying to figure it out. You hear trying. He's like, I can't do it. And I was like, well, exactly. That's the thing with yoga is people tell you verbally how to do something, but you don't have the hands-on. So people think they're doing what they're being told to do, but they're actually doing something differently. And so the hands-on and the external guide has that so much more power. And then when, especially yoga people, when they go into their yoga practice, then they can really expand that yoga practice because they feel and are more aware of what they're trying to achieve with the breathing, as opposed to doing what they think they're supposed to be doing, but actually doing something opposite, and then embedding this poor breathing pattern even deeper because they think they're doing a better, breathing pattern than they actually are.
That it's just so interesting to look at it that way too, especially when you talk about a yoga instructor who's supposed to be the person in the know, and here they can't do something, such as what you're describing there.
Yeah, what they're teaching all their students to do, and then they're doing it wrong themselves, and then the students are looking at them, trying to imitate them when they're doing it wrong themselves,
So listeners, what we're really saying is stop with the guru worship. You're just as capable and just as smart as anyone else to figure this all out. Now, I'll tell you that as you're talking about that hands-on, where you taught them to breathe deeper, is over time, that's how I learned to actually relieve hiccups. And, at first it was, the breathing, and then eventually in the practice of meditation, it was breathing into the belly, as you were describing earlier. And I started thinking, I wonder if the hiccups are a result of an irritated diaphragm, that it just starts twitching. And so as a result, what I would do is if I got hiccups, is I would actually start breathing deep, and I'd breathe it down into that area where the diaphragm is. You can actually feel it. And what I'd do is I'd hold it there with the intention of massaging it and making it stay still. Then I'd breathe out slowly, and then I'd breathe in again real slowly down in that area. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm sort of like taking my hand, but through the breath, and going down and just gently massaging the diaphragm to say, just relax. And generally I get rid of my hiccups within a minute and a half.
Yeah.
And so what you're talking about makes a lot of sense. And the idea that the breath is so profound in healing, and so many people don't realize this is free if you just learn to use it correctly.
Sure. If you look at a little baby breathing, the chest barely moves at all, and it's all the belly going, in and out. And now, with our modern, everyone's sucking in their stomachs because they have to have a hard, flat stomach, and puffing out their chest because men and women both want to have big chests, right?
Right.
So it's the exact opposite of how we're supposed to be holding ourselves. It's like letting the chest relax and letting the breath come into the abdomen and in the sides and in the lower back instead of, holding things hard and puffing the chest out. It's really interesting.
Now, how can our listeners, I know that one of your practices is in Portland, Oregon, and I noticed by the website apparently there's another center in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and then Tucson, Arizona. Can they find out, are there other places, or is it pretty available? Is there a website they can go and find out, is there a practitioner in their area?
There's a couple of websites. Nei Tsang Untitled.com is my teacher's website, and he has a more vast network of practitioners in the country.
Okay.
And they're going to be a little bit more gentle of a style. And then there's, I think it's the Universal Healing Tao, which is the Asian version of Nei Tsang, which is, you're going to find it a lot more painful. China, if it doesn't hurt, nothing's happening, and people are much more able to relax into pain, whereas here we take more painkillers than any place else in the world, so pain is not acceptable. And, so we've had a lot of people from the Montauk Chia school in China that it's hard for them to keep a practice, and then when they learn how to do it a little bit more gentle for us round eyes here, then it's much more effective. You know, if people don't come back, it's hard to work with them.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. I was just having a conversation with someone, I think it was last night, and I said, what is it about Americans, that we're becoming such sissies? Not to be, overly critical, but everybody's complaining about everything. Oh, I've got a gluten intolerance, or, oh, I've got this, and oh, poor me, and it's like, enough already.
This radio show is primarily heard in the Portland area, correct?
It's actually heard all over the world. Yeah, so it's pretty interesting stuff. Now, go ahead and give out those, or at least one or two of those websites again.
Okay, so my website is cntcenter.com, which is Nei Tsang, cntcenter.com, and then the other one is Nei Tsang, spelled out. So CHINEITSANG. CNT Center is a little bit easier to remember. The Universal Healing Tao, I believe, is the worldwide one that'll have the most practitioners, but again, they're going to Portland. There's a really good practitioner that works out of my center there, and you can find her ARPS, my primary person that's there.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much for bringing this to the world and sharing this with our listeners. I'm sure that people are going to be very interested about, coming after and finding out just how this can help perhaps change their lives.
Definitely can be very profound for people, especially with the digestive disorders, because the digestive disorders are, basically emotional indigestion. That's the one thing that Western medicine is finally starting to put a little bit of an emotional base to, because they're treating the the intestinal disorders with antidepressants now.
Oh my!
So,
well, Andrew, thank you so much for joining us on the Beyond 50 radio program.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
You bet. So there's your opportunity, folks, to basically go for a hands-on practice to heal yourself and then learn to do it for yourself as well. After all, you know more about your body than anyone else, so why not take that first step to become your own expert? You can also find out more by visiting us at beyond50radio.com. We'll put a link up there so you can find out more about this wonderful ancient practice. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. You've been listening to the Beyond 50 radio program, and remember, live your day past halfway.